Yeah, he's too young for that. All right, so it is 7:30. We are re-entering regular session. So I called our meeting to order at 6 p.m. tonight, at which point we immediately went into executive session. Would you all please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So nobody is signed in for public comment tonight. Welcome, everyone. We do, it's nice to have a good news story, I think, to start this meeting. So James Connor is an Eagle Scout candidate with Troop 105. I'm going to ask him to come to the podium. He's going to present to the committee what his plans are in his Eagle Scout project, and he is going to ask us to provide permission for him to move forward. So James?
Well, thank you for letting me speak here tonight. So my project is going to be a STEM outreach program at the Pembroke Community Center. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to set up a 3D printer at the Pembroke Community Center, or the PCC, because syllables are annoying. And we will also be doing a maker fair at the community center, and that will consist of doing different STEM activities and kits. So things like building paper moon landers, STEM trivia, launching model rockets, though we won't actually be doing that in the gymnasium.
But can we do it outside?
And also, we will be trying to provide advice to students and to their parents about career paths and STEM education, and I'll get to that more in a few seconds. I think that this project and others like it are increasingly needed in the U.S. because the level of education that we need for jobs at all levels has risen significantly from where it was just 30 years ago, and it's only going to keep going up. So helping our teens cultivate a learning mentality will improve our community and our nation. And a couple of things that I would like to ask is if I can be put into contact with any teachers and see if they can give some advice either at the community center or in some text or video medium. And also I would like permission to put up these flyers for the project around at the school.
Do you have copies of the flyers that you could hand out?
Yes, I do.
Thanks, James. Do you want to do printing as a career? Because this is really good. Wow. Right.
And I'll get to all of you afterwards. Okay. So yeah.
Where did you want to put these out?
Like I like to, if there's like a, if there are any like designated areas for posters and flyers and such, I would like to put them up there.
Sure, and if you send it to me electronically, we can push it out as part of our broadcast email.
Okay.
too.
Yes, thank you.
And some of us have social media too that we can use to push it out as well.
That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Looks like a fun event.
That's the intention.
All right, so James, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You're gonna need some money to do this, correct?
Yes.
All right, I do this all the time. I'm gonna give you your first $100 to put towards the event, and of course, they tease Mr. Chilcott, and he'll give you the second $100.
I will.
How's that?
I will.
So you've now raised $200 to get towards your goal, and I guess the rest is up to you.
Okay.
Is that
Thank
fair?
you. Yes.
So just let us know how to get it to you.
Yeah. Just scan the QR code and on the flyer that'll bring you to the project website, and then there's a donation page.
Oh, great.
Linked in the site.
Awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you again for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
No, just this is a really great idea, and it's different than some of the other ones we've heard, and I'm excited for this project.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
great.
So I guess my question for the committee, you can sit down. Thank you. My question to the committee, because this isn't using a school or a school, we actually don't need to
Yeah,
provide
so we're not the
approval, correct?
beneficiary, right?
Right,
We're not
yeah.
with that, but
But
it's a great project.
But we
I
can still
think it's a
support it.
great project, and it would be great for all of us to actively support it, and support James and sort of what he's pulling together. And then Aaron will be in touch as far as who might be able to link in and help you, James, with just information and data from the schools and that type of thing. But we are thrilled to support it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys are, of course, welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but you do not have to. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
Nope.
Any formal communications that I'm not aware of? Nope. Okay. Bills are circulating. So we do have meeting minutes. Could I get a motion to accept the meeting minutes of February 25th and March 4th as presented?
So moved.
Second.
So motion by Allison, seconded by Katrina. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie. And I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, great. So continuing with our budget presentations tonight, we are going to hear from Jess and Mary Beth. But before we do that, there is just a request for 2 middle school, middle level waivers. So we're looking for a waiver for softball. We have had the 8th grade waiver for softball for several years now. There are, I'm just going to tell you the last number because today was the first day of tryouts because they were canceled yesterday. Obviously, when we bring 8th graders on, it is to field the JV team at the high school. So we have 15 students in grades 9 through 12 that had registered, but obviously with the 8th grade waiver, we could bring in enough to have the full JV team.
This is for softball.
Softball, yep. For boys lacrosse, we haven't asked you for a waiver for boys lacrosse since the spring of 2023. We need somewhere in the low 20s in order to really field a varsity and JV team. We currently have 15 students registered. So we are hopeful that you would support a boys lacrosse waiver so we can get a solid JV team. Obviously with 15 students, we would still run it, but what happens is we end up not having enough sometimes to play and we have to cancel. So the 8th grade waiver would allow us to field a solid JV team.
The 8th graders only play JV.
They cannot play out, no. They can only play the lowest level of sport that you offer.
Other questions on the waiver?
Do we have to worry about, lacrosse is a little bit more,
Yeah, so we had this conversation pretty in depth in 23 when we asked for the waiver because there is more contact in boys lacrosse than there was girls lacrosse. At the time, Brian talked to everyone through the safety equipment, the level of checking that's allowed. Obviously, seniors are not playing JV lacrosse. It is capped at 11th grade, so the age span of kids is still only 3 years. It's not the full 4. But we didn't have any issues in 23 when we had the waiver. We have a really strong youth lacrosse program here in Pembroke, so the kids that are playing have been playing for several years and are aware of the safety and how to play safely.
We saw several of them practicing
Correct.
when we came in tonight.
Those children were
actually.
small though.
Yes, they're not playing. Other questions?
no. I
So-
just see those little kids playing, and I imagine them up against the high school kids, you know. 8th grade's such a funny.
Can I get a motion to approve the MIAA middle level waivers for boys lacrosse and softball?
So moved.
So motion by Katrina.
Second.
Seconded by David. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie.
All right, Mary Beth is up first. She's going to give you the FY26 teaching and learning budget presentation. There is some obviously overlap between some of the things you've heard, whether it's in the elementary or secondary presentations, music or technology, but again, this is teaching and learning as a whole.
Great, so I want to just obviously give a nod to the team that put this together. Dr. Galligan, who's the humanities supervisor, Saviz Savizada, who does world languages, Jonathan Shapiro, our STEM content supervisor, and Melinda Solowoda, who you heard from earlier this year, who's new to the group. I think this is a good time for me to thank you for your support from last year in regards to reorganizing our department. If you recall, in the past, we had a math content supervisor and a science content supervisor, and through reorganization, we were able to add an elementary content supervisor, which I believe has been a very positive thing for our community and for our learners, and get more into that as we go through the presentation. Tonight, we're going to talk about the goals that we identified last year and how we did against those goals. We're going to take a look at our goals for next year, our budget requests, the best part, and the next steps. So we had a lot of celebrations from last year. You were very generous in supporting a Dibbles paid subscription and the expansion of peer assessment for the K-6 community, somewhat a little bit for pre-K, but not as directly, which has been a huge impact on reading and math in terms of the way that we work with students in the district. It allows, the Dibbles subscription allows our reading specialists to push in more frequently and to pull groups more easily because they're able to get the data that they need in a much more efficient manner than when they were doing it by hand last year. And the peer assessment software has enabled teachers to move some of their exams, many of our benchmarks, especially in math, to an online system where they're getting very data-rich information to be able to identify how students are doing in a much quicker turnaround time than when we're looking at it. It also gives us an opportunity with Melinda to be in different schools and to work directly with teachers to support them in using those, particularly the peer assessment, to support teachers in using that tool and then to lead conversations about the data at common planning times or at other group meetings. We expanded last year pathways to include global citizenship, music, and information technology. We added AP Spanish Literature this year. We added AP World History this year. 16 seniors completed an internship or a certificate aligned with a college and career ready pathway. We were awarded the College Board AP Silver Medal. If you probably don't recall, but last year we had a bronze medal. This year we had a silver medal, and we're pushing hard for gold. 47% of our seniors scored a 3 or higher on an AP exam, which is very noteworthy, very, very positive for a school of our size, given how many APs we offer. And we were also awarded an AP Access Award, which just speaks to the fact that we are inclusive and that we do encourage students. We eliminate as many barriers as possible to our courses, and also percentage-wise, our students who are categorized in special populations or in the low-income bracket are also accessing those classes. So that's what they're tracking at that level. Our focus areas this year have been in pre-K to 6 on curriculum and math benchmark revisions. Particularly, we're taking a look at writing. We have some early adopters of a program called Simplify Writing. We're trying to figure out the best way for us to be aligned vertically in the K to 6 arena. We're also exploring science curriculum so that we can pilot 2 for next year and then adopt 1 and have that be what we are doing moving forward. It's been a little bit piecemeal for the past few years, and I think that's very unsettling for teachers and for students, and we need to have a program that everybody is in favor of and something that we can count on K to 5. As you know, Open Sci-Ed starts in grade 6 and goes 6 to 8. In grades 7 through 12, we've been examining grading practices and looking at student work. There's a whole host of research out there around grading and how that impacts students, and just we're trying to challenge ourselves to think differently about assessments and how we weigh those assessments and what their actual value is to us in terms of the feedback that we get from them. We're accepted into a grant funded through 1-8, which is an applied learning practices grant, which gives administrators an opportunity to go out and look at other schools and see how other schools are implementing different programs. We were fortunate enough to go to Boston last month and see classes at the John D. O'Brien School and also at Boston Collegiate. And that was really helpful. It was really exciting to see those classes. I think the Boston students thought they had a snow day, so the classes looked really small to us, but it was really great. It's really nothing better from my perspective than being in classrooms and talking to teachers and hearing how they develop their thinking and their thoughts and how they work with students. I mean, that's really the heart of and the core of our work, and that's the most exciting part of what we do. The goals that we set for ourselves for this year had to do with the science program, and as I just mentioned, we'll be working on those pilots and also a literacy program. Our teachers have not been 100% in favor of purchasing a huge program, but they are looking for some support and also using that, whatever we land on, to supplement what they're already doing. Our teachers are doing amazing work. They have created a lot of teacher-developed materials in their grade level groups. We don't see a huge need to toss all that out. We don't want to go in that direction, but we want to make sure that everybody has the support they need to continue to develop student skills around writing and also in regards to writing, integrating grammar as well. We said last year that we would be adding some new classes, and we will be adding AP Pre-Calculus and an AP Seminar. We will be adding the third year of our Project Lead the Way classes in engineering and biomedical science. We've revised the graduation requirements, as you know, to include world language and the VPA courses. So that brings us to the requests. Here we go. I am asking next year that we add a .4 business teacher, which would allow Mary Ellen Gates, our Pathways Coordinator, to attend to full-time to placing students, coaching people, supporting interns, and working with the businesses that we have partnered with thus far. We have a lot of new partnerships this year, but as our biomedical and engineering students, we know those are our biggest groups. As they are moving their way through the pathway, next year we'll have double the amount of seniors looking for placements. And it is a very lengthy process, and if you do it safely and you do it well, it requires a tremendous amount of time and thought. So we are looking for a .4 business teacher, which would allow her to continue to do that work. I'm also coming to you to talk about world language. I think it's in the 21st century, the best place for world language is to start in the elementary level. I know in our fiscal environment that that's a very difficult sort of ask, but I just want to keep it in mind as we move forward that that's an important thing for us to be thinking about for our students. Also, in terms of mathematics, I would love to see our reading specialists mirrored with a mathematics group. I think they're doing amazing work, and I think that our students benefited during the ESSER funding when we had some money for interrupted tutoring. I think that was a very positive piece to the work that we were doing at that time. Just
do you want us to hold questions or ask
I'm sorry.
do you want us to hold questions?
Oh, no, you can ask anytime. Yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I did, but do you guys have any questions first on sort of what's been presented so far?
I have a quick question, but I can wait till the end, so it's okay. Go ahead.
So I guess the one on the slide that one before this one here.
This one?
Yeah. I can actually find it. Yeah, it was on the, yeah, so just bear with me.
From FY25?
So on the,
Focus area.
on the focus area, right, when you talked about going out to different schools to see grading
Oh,
and,
yes, yeah.
and how the grading would happen, any idea how that might impact what we're going to do going forward? Is it just too early?
Are you talking about the applied learning grant?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what we're noticing, and Melinda made reference to it when she was here too, is pedagogy around teaching and learning is changing dramatically. Everybody is really moving to an inquiry-based method of learning. there are positives to that, and then there are also times where direct instruction and one-on-one instruction is very important as well. But looking at how that works in classrooms that are, it's just different. For example, we observed a classroom in Boston that had to do with a math lesson. It had to do with Ferris wheels around the world. It was I want to say it was a pre-calculus class or something like that, and they were looking at each of these Ferris wheels, and they had 3 different representations. They had graphs, they had equations, they had a narrative piece to it, and the students were mixing and matching and trying to decide based on the Ferris wheel in front of them, were these statements true? Did that graph make sense? It was really exciting, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about it's like applied learning, like actually looking at problems and solving the problem and having to use your skills. Many classes are already doing that, but there are actually curriculums now that do that all the way through, which is quite a shift, and it's quite exhausting, not only for students, but it can be exhausting for teachers. So learning who's doing it well and finding pockets where it makes sense for us to integrate that is a really a positive thing for us. A lot of our science classes naturally fit into that mode. The project Lead the Way classes, that's the basis of the work that they do. There are different projects that they're doing that are supported by that type of pedagogy in history and in English and in math. We're just not that familiar with them, and we're looking at them all the time just to see, does this make sense? Is this a good fit? We actually have a class at PHS, AQR, Advanced Quantitative Reasoning, that has a lot of that problem-solving aspect to the work as well. So we're just looking to see what there is out there, because you always want to be seeing what's coming down the pike, and also what's working. You know, it's great. You know, a lot of ideas are great, but sometimes they're difficult to implement.
So just as a follow-up to that, so Open Science, how many years have we been doing that?
So it's the 3rd year for, we're in the 3rd year for grade 6, and I think we're in year 4 for 7 and 8.
And I'm just curious, how is it received? How do the teachers feel about it, and how do we have any data yet showing whether or not it's helping?
I think it's been mixed, honestly. I think that when they rolled out the program at the state level, there were 2 sets of standards that they were working with. They were working with national standards and Massachusetts standards. We opted to go with the Massachusetts standards. Some of the assessments and the sequencing of units has not been ideal. So we've been trying to work through that. So for that reason, I think it's been, that piece of it has been a challenge for our teachers. I mean, they've been amazing about adopting it and working. It's been a ton of professional development and time for them. It's an extremely time-consuming curriculum in regards to the preparation. And also sort of the foundational elements of it have to do with student-led inquiry and developing some of what we might call, or we used to call, soft skills around collaboration and identifying problems, and how do you do that, and teaching students to do that. So you're not just teaching science concepts, you're also teaching this whole other set of skills as well. But our teachers have been awesome in regards to how they do it. But I would say that, you know, it's had its ups and downs in terms of just getting used to it and seeing how it fits. And one of the things we'll be looking at this summer is, how do those units make sense where they are? Is there a better way for us to organize that so our students benefit more from it's a very rich curriculum, but how can we make sure they're getting there? Also, when they rolled it out, sometimes this happens, I think, when, you know, sometimes when you're not in the classroom and you're developing a program and blah, 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 it's also great. But, you know, when you're actually doing it, like, there wasn't as much assessment information, there wasn't as much traditional content that we could pull out and figure out, are kids really getting this, or, you know, are they dependent on a notebook all the time, or are they actually learning the concepts? So we're working at a lot of that still with the program. Having said that, I do think it's very interesting to be exploring phenomenon, and that's kind of what it is. It gives you a question, you know, why does something make a sound, or how does light move? So it's very interesting, but are kids retaining it? That's the next phase. Yeah,
okay.
So that's the next
Got it.
phase. Yeah.
And then on your personnel requests, and I actually appreciate what you're saying about, you know, the fiscal times, and fiscal 26 is going to be tough. I mean, it is. It's been signaled by the Commonwealth. It's been signaled by the governor. You heard our representatives at the last meeting also signal it. Fiscal 26 will be tough, but I think we've been talking about world language at an elementary level for probably 15 years if I go back, right? And when you teach a language at an elementary level, the kids pick it up, they become far more proficient, far faster. It is 100%, this is my viewpoint, where you would do that. Which languages would you focus on if we were to go down this path? And could you start, I know it's not ideal, could you start with one that shares time? Or like, is it an all or nothing option?
No, I think there are many ways that we could integrate world language. But any way that we want to integrate is going to cost something.
Yeah, I agree.
The way I would think of it is by, backwards design. What are we offering at the high school? And then how can we make it exploratory and fun for students so that they are learning sort of the basic kind of vocabulary of this or that and about cultures. I would go with that level, probably K to 4. And you might want to do something more in-depth with your 5th and 6th graders, so.
And does this include materials, or is this solely
No,
people?
but I don't know in terms of materials how much of a heavy lift that would be initially. I think that based on the world language teachers that I've had the pleasure of observing, that they would have quite a bag of tricks. And again, that there's a lot just, paper. Yeah, you can use what we have. We can use what we have. I don't think I'm not sure that there's a structured curriculum yet that we have got that far. Right now, we're just hoping to get some momentum in regards to getting languages into the elementary level.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you see this running as like a specialist, or would this be?
I could see it running in a whole host of different ways.
I know the elementary presentation talked about adding back in a 4th
Yeah.
specialist, so I didn't know if that's what this is, or if we're looking at that
Yeah,
presentation.
I would think
meant
of it that way initially, perhaps. I think we have to get some backing for it, and whatever we can afford, we start there, and then we seek to refine that. But yes, a specialist model would fit, especially to begin with. I think it would be great. Just a little background or numbers. I know the data is always helpful when we're trying to make these determinations, just so you can see where our pathway students are right now. And you can see that our juniors, there'll be 54 students at least looking for placements next year. That is quite an endeavor. Mary Ellen Gates, who works with our students, meets with them, counsels them, works on soft skills with them. They work on resumes, they work on interviewing. So there's a lot that goes into preparing a student to go out and interview for an internship, and also then she has to be available to work with the people on site too. Just, this is generally covered by the teaching and learning budget already, but just so you know where some of that money is going, this is not a huge ask, but in our summer curriculum development, there'll be some new courses that we're focusing on. Some of those will be at the middle school in regards to offering some drama and some art and some strength and conditioning. That's a little bit different. And at the high school, we'll be offering the music technology and rock band. And we've talked about that already. As you've already approved some of this stuff. But then the professional development that follows with that is listed at the bottom for some of the other classes that will be going on. So this is the fun page. The new instructional materials for next year seem to be increasing at an alarming rate, but I do want to just point out that some of this is grant funded. And also some of it is capital that will last for quite a while, especially the items that we're talking about for the computer integrated manufacturing and for medical interventions. The CNC milling machine that you see there up in the blue, that is, if you think of a 3D printer, like when you send in information to the 3D printer and it makes things like out of the wires and the filaments, right? What this does is it takes a block, and then from the block, the CAD/CAM design, it's like deductive. It takes away from it to create something. So it's sort of the next step in regards to computer integrated manufacturing. Teaching students how to use that machine is very important. There's also robotics arms that go with that, which are again capital requests, so it gets pretty...
So just to clarify, it's not part of what we asked for in our capital request?
Oh, it's not?
No. So it's considered capital because the useful life is longer than the 10 years. But these are a couple of the things that we were hoping to target, those pothole grants, for lack of a better word, that our reps talked to us about the last time, something that's unique to Pembroke, that's a one-time fund, that, a one-time expense.
And the same thing with the medical interventions. There's a whole host of things. There's something called a warm bath. Hold on. It's the coolest thing. So fun, like talking to the teachers and learning about it. It's a water bath, thermal cycler, just great things for our students who want to enter that field to have seen and worked with and to understand how it works. There's also the kit right there for our medical interventions for stitching wounds, and the kids are going to have some opportunity to really explore what it looks like to, touch and use this equipment. That's huge. AP pre-calculus, that's a pretty standard cost for textbooks for that class. Textbooks and support. Same with Spanish. Spanish literature is a little different because they're more supplemental texts and it's a much smaller class. We'll be looking for the grade 8 civics texts need to be renewed. We'll be adding medical detectives at the middle school. Again, most of that will be grant funded. That's in an attempt to make sure that our students leaving the middle school have an idea of what a biomedical science is and what engineering is, sort of to counter with the work that they're already doing. At the elementary level, we're looking for StoryWorks, Simplify Writing, and again, to field test 2 programs at least in the science arena so that we can make a decision next year and move forward on that.
So the good news here, there's about a third of it, about 30% of it's grant funded, if I did my
Yeah,
math
we have,
right.
I mean, there is still,
Which is
we're in
great.
our year 3 of
Yeah.
our grant, but that should help us. It won't cover everything, but it will help us tremendously. This is a summary of our requests, as you can see. And I just wanted to note that we are presently funded at $150,000, so it's not all necessarily a brand-new request, but just so you keep in mind what we're looking for. What are we going to be doing next? We're going to be looking at writing expectations by grade level, including grammar, and hoping to, really take the best work that everybody is doing in the district and create a vertical alignment so that everybody, what we're saying in one class 1 year is reinforced the next year, sort of like the spiraling thing. And that is happening on an informal basis right now, but maybe formalizing that. Again, selecting a science program, implementing medical detectives. One of the things that we'll be looking at too next year is exploring the feasibility of offering American Sign Language. I know that was something that we talked about. We talked to a couple of districts that are doing it. It sounds awesome. It's difficult to find licensed ASL teachers that want to work in schools like that. So that's one piece of it. But aside from that, also we're thinking that might be something that's a 2-year course of study instead of a 4-year course of study. We have to really work through some of the logistics of that. Continue to focus on grading practices with the goal towards recommendations for 26-27. And integrating those applied learning principles that we were talking about, really based on increasing engagement for students so that they have a real reason to come and do the work and understand why they're doing it and can make that exciting for them. And that, my friends, is all I have.
That's great. Any questions, further questions?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really
Thanks, Mary
good
Beth.
presentation, so.
Thank you. I think we've talked about most of these things through the course of the year already. Do you want to swatch the seats? You got
I
it?
think I'm okay.
All right.
You want to log out of? Hello, everybody. Just student services as far as overview, looking at our highlights for FY25, certainly highlighting all the sections and areas of the student services with special education, section 504, our English language learners, social emotional learning, and then moving into FY26 budget requests, similar to kind of the profile I think all of our presentations have been. So some of the things I just wanted to highlight, I know in January I presented pretty lengthily on special ed, so just a little bit of reinforcement and some of the things we've been doing. Certainly, we rolled out that new IEP, which you've heard me talk about a few times, that form. Our focus really this year has been on educating families and taking the time during the meeting process to really go through each of the changes and the process. Looking to do a survey at the end of the year just to get that feedback. Some of the other things we rolled out was a more comprehensive preschool evaluation. Started last year. This year we rolled it out in its full capacity. It's been a lot of positive feedback from families and evaluators. The Linda Mood Bell reading program that you heard me talk about, which is a multi-sensory reading program under Linda Mood Bell. And then one of the other purchases we were able to do going into this year was Pocket Talk. So they are two-way communication devices for some of our English language learners. They've been a great resource this year, not just by our teachers and students. Even one of our basketball coaches this year had one and used that. So that's been an effective tool, and appreciate the funding for those things this year. Some additional highlights, some of the trainings that we've been doing. So our 18 to 22 transition program has had the opportunity to do a partnership with CVS in Boston at their training center. So they have learned lots of great skills. They do plan to work more locally at the CVS, but that's been a great opportunity for them traveling into Boston at that training center. We expanded, I know I've talked about this a little bit before, and we always talk about our unified sports, expanding that to grades 5 and 6. They've had a couple of games, both in Duxbury and in Pembroke, over the last couple of weeks. So our 5th and 6th graders are joining that middle school 7 and 8 team. So they've done some work kind of internally, and now they're on to competing against other teams as well.
So Jess, can I ask you a question on that? Because
Sure.
maybe about a month ago when you gave the special education report, I think David was incredibly eloquent and passionate about this program. So is this a program that is going to continue to grow? We see the ability for that to continue next year and in future years?
Our unified program?
Yes.
Yes, I don't see it going anywhere. Donna McGarrigle was intrigued in kind of expanding that 5th and 6th grade model and did a lot of the legwork on that, involving Ashley Cross at Havamock to do that. So
That's
we don't
great.
see that going anywhere. I know there was questions by the just Mark Talbot in regards to some of the funding at the high school level. We just didn't have the amount of students participating this year to really join like a league.
But if we have enough students that could run at the high school?
Yes.
Because I just can't imagine from a funding perspective, it's so expensive that it would be prohibitive. So I want to be careful, and to your point, right? If it's a student take-up issue, that's one thing, right? That we
Right.
don't have enough students who want to do it. But a funding
There's
issue,
a
I
funding
think we
piece
should
to the
talk
high
about
school
it.
piece, and so that's why Mark was asking for additional money for extracurriculars for that. So we'll come back to you and admin recommendation.
Got it. Thank you.
And then just 2 weeks ago, a company called Understanding Our Differences came in at the middle school level. I participated in that training. They trained our student council for grades 7 and 8 on disability awareness. So how to work with students with disabilities, different profiles of students, how to engage, how to be a good friend, kind of recognizing when a student's having a difficult time and what are some strategies and tools working with kids. So they plan to do a train the trainer model. It's quite a large student council, so breaking off into kind of groups and working with our 6th grade ambassadors at the elementary level.
And that was a student-led request, right?
Yeah.
Like the students,
Correct.
I love
Yes.
that.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's also a great
Certainly,
organization.
as we move on to current staffing, just kind of an overview of both our special education, mental health staff, as well as our English language learner teachers. Just as you can see, a variety of resources. We certainly support from administration level to teachers, paraprofessionals, support staff, and then some of our contract service providers. Just a little bit overview, because I did go into, like I said, in January, that in-depth profile of our accountability for special education, just our percentage of special ed students, as that's kind of ebbs and flows on a daily basis. We're at around 485 students. That's about 20% of our population. We've run close to the state level for the past few years. We're right at the state level at this point. So we are kind of going with that, certainly that trend. It has been on an uptick, as you can see, kind of from our numbers as well as I go into Section 504 accommodation plans. Just some more pictures. This is our vocational opportunity at our PACE program at the high school. I'm sure you've heard about the coffee bean. If you haven't experienced it, it's a great thing to do on Friday mornings. Our students in the PACE program run the program, so it is like a store, a coffee store. And they do the cooking, they do the cash registers, they are servicing students. Over the last year, our students at Havelock have had the opportunity in our programs to take orders for Havelock teachers, and then they go to the high school and purchase items and then bring it back. So that's been a great addition for our students at Havelock as well. So there's some cute pictures to show off their opportunities. So Section 504, just a kind of quick overview for those people unfamiliar with the Section 504 accommodation plan. Those are plans for students who have disabilities, so whether that's a mental or a physical impairment, where their disability substantially impacts kind of their life functioning. In a school setting, we think about the environment, whether they require things in the classroom for learning, or with the environment of physical things. So students who might need an elevator, we have students on medical 504s that require things in the nursing department, diabetic, etc. So differences kind of between special education and Section 504. Special ed are for students who require specialized instruction, so changing what we're doing with students, the way we're presenting, content, curriculum, instruction, or student output. Section 504 is really just the accommodations, so it's supporting curriculum and instruction and or the environment. We're not making changes. It's just a little bit different. As you can see, again, kind of those numbers have increased over the last 4 years for a variety of reasons. We did shift our students on medical plans to actually legal plans under Section 504 based on guidance from our attorney, as well as obviously increased needs of students, especially in the mental health realm. Our English language learners, so the number of L's have run, within the 70s over the last 4 years. So we're seeing a little bit of a decrease of direct instruction and the number of L's. But again, that kind of fluctuates depending week to week or month to month, but right in that 70 range. Our social emotional behavioral needs, as you've kind of we've shared before, we do have a good amount of students in the district that receive counseling services, both through general education and special ed. So in the small group setting, so our counselors, both our social workers and school psychologists run, social groups, counseling groups, friendship groups, lunch bunches, and then individual counseling, both for gen ed and special ed students. As you can see, there are several hundred students that access that pretty regularly. That's a pretty consistent number for our counseling staff. We do contract with Pilgrim Area Collaborative, as you've heard me define the BCBA LABA kind of differences. Our behaviorist, that is about 17 hours a week she does for us. That is servicing primarily students on IEPs, so they're direct services, whether that's it's mostly consultation model, but those are services in students' IEPs. She also does consultation to our substantially separate programs and teachers working directly with them to support our students. Our therapeutic resource room, so the Compass program at the high school, our middle school, they call it Titan Compass, kind of a combination, and then our Titan Labs at the elementary level as well. As you can see, about 150 students over this year have accessed those Titan Compass rooms. It's kind of a level of support in those rooms. Some kids do check in, check out. At the secondary level, especially at the high school, they may be there for a block of time. Other kids spend the majority of their day there when they're transitioning back from either a difficult time, a medical absence, etc. Some students do require, some support in those rooms. So at the elementary level, we do have paraprofessionals, at the middle school, as well. And at the high school, we have a teacher and a paraprofessional. So as we get it, is there any questions before I move on?
One quick question.
Sure.
For the therapeutic resource rooms, is that something that is primarily recommended by teachers, or is that ever something that parents can also reach out if they have thoughts about?
Yeah,
their
so
student?
usually it's a collaboration
Okay.
model. They are referral processes. So in our elementary, we call it instructional support teams. At the high school level, we have SST and then AST. So one's an academic, one's a social emotional kind of team. Those referrals are made at the elementary level generally by gen ed teachers and goes through that intervention model of tiered support, which I'll talk about in a couple slides ahead, just about referrals and interventions and levels of support. Guidance counselors, social workers, and certainly if a student is struggling and a parent is contacted, whether it's a teacher or mental health staff administration, that is brought right to that instructional support team. And then the team decides kind of what level of support a child needs. Tier 1 is generally in the classroom. Tier 2 and Tier 3 is we get into more check-in, check-out, and then full-time or part-time in those rooms.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful.
So special education requests, as the elementary principals and their budget presentation alluded to, we are requesting to create a social emotional substantially separate special ed classroom. It's a mouthful at the elementary level. I'll kind of reiterate that information in the next couple slides. Regarding other special ed requests, a 0.3 full-time out-of-district coordinator. I have requested this in the past. This would alleviate some of the responsibilities from our secondary special ed coordinator. So Megan Cullum handles 7 through 12 and our 18 to 22 population, and then about 3/4 of our out-of-district students. So while our numbers have remained pretty steady out of district-wise in the 30s over the last few years, the needs of students, and you probably remember you talked about this last year, are different than the needs of our students in the past. So the level of meetings, the coordination with families, we are required obviously to do observations and things like that at out-of-district schools. It has increased. And then obviously the needs of our students as well. I do handle about 1/4 of our students, so I am the team chair for a little less than 10 students. So I'm running meetings, coordinating with families, going to schools, etc. So I do think it's not a full-time position, but having somebody part-time would be helpful and allow Megan then to do more support at that secondary level as well.
How hard is it to hire somebody part-time for that role?
Not most districts have a part-time person for
Oh, is
an
that right?
district
Okay.
coordinator unless they're a really large
Yeah, it's
district.
usually a retired sped director.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Great job.
Got it.
And then I would support, Mark Talbot had requested a full-time special ed teacher at the high school to support that co-teaching model for math and science. So I would support that as well.
So I do, before you dive into this, the 207,500, I remember vividly the conversation we had with the elementary teachers. Excuse me. My understanding was a lot of that was startup costs. Am I remembering that correctly or no?
No, so a lot of it isn't, it's personnel.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's a little bit of professional development. I think it was 5,000 maybe.
Yeah,
Looking at this.
so I just
Yeah,
skipped to
the rest of it
to
is
the slide.
I
people,
see
but
it.
we
I
talked
got
about
you. Yeah, yeah.
potentially, you don't necessarily need to fully staff it like this for year one, but
Yeah.
as it grows, you
Yeah,
need to.
And the reason I asked is, I think there's a lot of value in this, especially if we can keep kids in their local school, right? I think it's so important for families. It's important for those kids, the trajectory of where those kids are heading. I wonder if there's a way to help us launch this, if that's another request we can make to our representatives. Because this is something I have to think would have broad-based appeal on a model like this.
Right, and the hope is that it's a year one expense that pays for itself
No,
in
that's,
year two.
right,
so.
right. Or even you get it in the year one, have to fund part of year two, but by year three, it's self-sustaining.
And I
right?
think the other piece to add to your point is that eventually we could, potentially invite kids from out of district to
Yeah,
come
it's
to the
part of how it
program,
would be
which
self-sustaining,
would
too.
also be, I think, an additional piece that our representatives could get behind for having more placements close to home, because a lot of the out-of-district placements for elementary students with social emotional needs are very far away from here, so there aren't a ton of options.
Completely.
What an
agree.
amazing thing it would be to have something right here in Pembroke for the Pembroke families. I think,
Yeah.
that would be a huge thing for people.
Yeah, I do think if we can, whether it's in the actual budget, is earmark funding, if it's getting, some funding that we could at least do something now to get ready. I get that we can't with personnel, but anything we can do, I think, to try to take a swing at this is a good thing. I just think there's just so much good for our kids that can come out of this.
Great. Well, I appreciate the support. It's certainly at several of our top priorities in the district as far as administrators, so. And then some additional costs with social, emotional, and behavioral. Again, similar to the request from Mark Talbot and what I've presented in the past, having a full-time coordinator of behavioral, I'm calling it behavioral health, wellness, and counseling, so I think he called it a director of counseling. Certainly we could revise that, but really to be able to supervise and evaluate our guidance staff, 7 through 12, aligning our mental health kind of services and programming and supports pre-K to 22. Certainly now our administrators at the building level oversee it as well as myself, but having somebody being able to streamline that, obviously supervising and evaluating some of our staff as well, creating those professional learning communities for that group of staff members. And then thinking about establishing what we call care coordination. So resources that are out of school settings, agencies, and things like that for families to be able to have somebody act as that liaison, providing families with that support, et cetera.
So is it, if we're gonna get into care coordination, is there a possibility to get some form of funding or funding relief from DMH? Because care coordination is something they're constantly looking for, trying to get to. There are wide programs out there for it.
Yeah, so there is a grant that could be used for some of this through the Department of Public Health. The sustainability of the grant is in question right now, so we do get some grant funds this year. We got some last year. We've been told that it will continue at least for next year, so there is some funding that could supplement this. So.
And I'm only thinking that the DMH route because of the care coordination piece,
Yeah.
right? Because they do pay nonprofits to do that kind of work throughout the
It's been a
Commonwealth.
while
But-
since we've gotten funding from
Yeah,
DMH
I'm
or
sure that's
anything,
probably true, but, and then my other question though is, when I look at this, and I actually like the way you presented this, just with the coordinator of behavioral health, wellness, and counseling, but if they're going to supervise the mental health staff, would we be looking for somebody that has mental health licensures and counseling licensures, that type of thing to do this?
Potentially. So in thinking about like a job description, I think it's preferred to be able to do that, but it would just have to depend on kind of our focus areas.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, like our content coordinator for our STEM has a science certification, but can evaluate math teachers, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's some
yeah.
overlap there.
Yeah.
So you're looking for somebody that has experience supervising and evaluating
Yeah.
staff. It doesn't necessarily have to be content specific. but-
Sorry.
No, that's okay. And then the next request has to do with an intervention model, as I mentioned, really being able to add in a BCBA outside of what's provided for our special ed students, and then 3 RBTs. So just to go over, a board certified behavior analyst is a BCBA. They have the ability to conduct functional behavioral assessments. They have expertise in behavior analysis, working with staff, talking about disruptive behaviors, and helping us kind of shape and reform behaviors. RBTs would be implementing those plans that a BCBA would come up with, so they would be on the ground working with students. We use what's called a intervention model, so just looking at that tier, as I mentioned, tier 1 and 2 is what we have now, and some of those supports through those instructional support SST, AST teams. Tiers 3 and 4 would really be that adding, so to be able to refer to a behaviorist to say, we're really struggling with a student, we'd like you to do some observations, create a behavior plan, maybe it's a formal FBA, work with us on how to shape and kind of reduce kind of disruptive behaviors. And RBT would be on the ground working with both the student and then the staff. So it is an intervention model we have had in the past over the last several years previously due to some grant funding, and it worked really well. So our BCBAs would come to our, for example, IST team, they'd hear the concern, we talk about an intervention, they'd be gathering data, it may be a referral for an RBT, so an RBT would go directly into a classroom working with a student for a chunk of time. So we talk about response to intervention, anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks to be able to carry out, whether it's a behavior plan, coaching and modeling with staff, with the goal to be able to peel back as they've taught kind of the staff that we have and help the student kind of reduce kind of those disruptive behaviors. So the ask would be 1 full-time BCBA for the district and then 3 RBTs.
And in terms of, I think some of these things are getting to the root cause of why there's a behavior. And speaking as a former teacher, I think that can really transform a classroom. If you have, if there's one student who's really struggling, it can throw things off. Not that that's their fault, but we need to get them the support that they need. So I think while it looks like maybe just one line item, it can really have a huge effect.
And just some curricular requests. Our ELE department is looking for some online subscriptions and some more curricular resources, consumable workbooks, and some of those additional pocket talks that they've been so successful. Our transition program is looking to expand their life skills program, some curricular materials for them through unique learning. And then one of the special ed assessments that we use for cognitive assessments for students 16 and over, this is a new version. It is required use. We have 1 year to implement, so it rolled out in 2024, so it would be something we would need to purchase if we were going to continue to use this assessment. The big whopping number is at the bottom. I'm lower than Mary Beth. I'm never lower than you. I'm so happy. But as you can see, kind of the breakdown and the requests.
0 is still 0.
What was that?
I said 0 is still 0.
All right, yeah. Just kind of our next steps in the department. Some of are similar to what I talked about in January. We are certainly continuing to review that direct instruction model and our curricular and program needs in special ed, thinking about PD for our teachers. Even if we weren't able to add that social emotional program, really looking at our programming in those substantially separate programs, thinking about how we describe those programs to families, teachers, exit entrance criteria, taking a look at our student groupings, especially if we were going to add an additional program, and just curricular resources that they're using in there as well. That new IEP, talking about staff and parent surveying, and then exploring further professional development just on managing difficult behaviors.
Any additional questions for Jess?
One question I had is there was the grant that was talked about in Mary Beth's presentation. Just wondering, is there a way for some of the teachers to also observe like other out-of-district programs that maybe have a social and emotional program already in existence to see how we might design it?
Certainly, we can explore that. We've done that a little bit, and then we've had some programs come into ours in our PACE program a few years ago, so absolutely.
Cool, yeah.
Other questions?
No, I mean, I think between the one you gave in January and this, it's a lot of information, but thank you.
So the one thing I do just want to remind everybody, right, because there were a couple of very big numbers on these slides. One of the things that we regularly ask department heads, principals, administrators to do during this process of budgeting is to come with us with what they see, with what the need is. Part of that is to make sure that we're always innovating, that we're always thinking, that we're not thinking in a confined, we can only do this way, right? So, well, all of these things that get requested can't possibly be done because we wouldn't have the funds to do everything. It does help us ultimately set priorities. So I just want to make sure that everyone's very clear on that. This is a healthy way to budget and to make sure that we're constantly innovating and challenging ourselves. I do think with these two presentations specifically, though, teaching and learning and the student services, we begin to understand what schools and teachers are asked to do today versus what they were asked to do, I won't even say 20 years ago when I started doing some of this stuff, just 5 years ago. The level of behavioral health supports that a school was relied on in order to actually put forward. I mean, if we talked about a behavior analyst in a high school or an elementary school 5 years ago, I probably would have looked at you like you had 4 heads, right? But to your point, Katrina, there are ripple effects of these roles that help the nucleus of the classroom. It helps education move forward. It helps good teaching, right? It actually can add to pedagogy. It can add to sort of the support structure. So I just really think it's important for us to all recognize the fact that teaching in 2025 and the demands on a school in 2025 are remarkably different even than what they were in 2020. And we are super fortunate to have teachers that are out there every day in this district that are trying to do the best for all of our kids. I also think what you're doing with the CVS models and some of the workplace models for our kids with disabilities is awesome. That changes the trajectory of the lives of those kids. And it is just super important, so thank you.
Great, thank you. So that's it for my report. There is just one subcommittee update. I would like to share with you all that I was so fortunate to spend my St. Patrick's Day evening with the Community Preservation Committee last night, and they were in great spirits. I did go and move forward with our request for $400,000 of CPC funds to replace the playground at Hobbamuck. They were in such great spirits that they voted to give us $500,000. So on the spring town meeting warrant, CPC will be supporting the article for $500,000 for replacement of the Hobbamuck playground. We had some great conversation about economy of scale and what if we just did one thing versus doing all things. So I think unanimously they decided that doing it all at once makes the most sense there. There was some appetite for us to potentially do some fundraising so that families and students had a stake in the game over there. So we will look at trying to do something probably on a small scale, but just some kind of token towards the project as we move into the summer and early fall. So.
I do want to call out Allison, right?
I was just gonna say,
Allison brought this to the committee, and quite honestly, I knew what the number was going to be. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to happen. And Allison was adamant about it, right? She continued to push that this was dangerous. It was dangerous for kids. And I think your leadership is what got this done, so thank you.
Yeah, great job, Allison. That was
I
awesome.
do want to just let you know that we did wipe out a good amount of their undesignated fund. So it would be a few years before they
So we
would be
can't
able
do
to
this
help
again
us
next year?
with another project, but there's,
More
obviously,
fundraising
we
might
talked
be
about
needed.
all 3 playgrounds.
And I also want to point out too, like the great collaboration with Steve Siciotti, the select board member who came up with the idea of asking for the funds to begin with. So, because I don't even think we were thinking in that direction at the time, and I think that was great. So,
Well, I remember too, I'm trying to remember which meeting it would have been, but I know, I think it was John Brown mentioned that the CPC had paid for the Matakeesit ball field, and that's kind of also what spurred some.
Right.
Yeah.
Lance
Movement
Kennedy, the
in that
recreation
direction.
director, was there last night too to support our project, which was
That's
really
awesome.
cool.
When we come together in a unified way
right.
to actually get the work done, I think it's awesome. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, John.
Well, and also
Thank you, Allison.
on the CPC is a gentleman whose background is rec, so he like knew
He understood.
That's great.
what he knew looking at the report what it actually meant, and he was able to speak with other professionals in the field to kind of realize that the 400, especially with the economy kind of changing right now, that it might not stretch far enough, and then we might be in a place of not being able to actually do it. So it was a pleasant surprise to walk out with more money than we were asking for.
And then finally, last but not least, Erin, you did an amazing job putting this together. You put together the application. I mean, it's amazing, and it just
Now we just have to
everyone.
get the town to support it at town
Yes.
meeting, which I hope we can do.
Well, again, I don't play the Mutual Admiration Society here, but the gentleman that did all the assessment for us was a Pembroke guy.
Oh my gosh!
And you
yeah.
talk about, I think respectfully, I think he gave us a little bit of a hometown discount. But that was, again, someone in the community stepping forward with a skill set to say, hey, I'm here to help you. And again, when you work it together, all angles, I think it's just amazing. So, I'm sorry, Aaron, you said his name.
Christopher Woods.
Christopher Woods. Thank you, Mr. Woods.
And
So-
what's his company's name?
Oh, Safety
know?
Solutions.
Okay. So thank you to
And
him.
he'll be doing the other two schools at some
Yep,
point.
so he just emailed me earlier this week about setting up the next ones. So
And it's Bryantville, then North?
Bryantville and then North.
Okay.
It's great.
And
Great.
I have a quick
Okay.
question, like speaking of kind of all the things that we've been looking at, where I think like the strategic plan might help us at some point, so where are we
Yep,
with?
so I'm gonna
that?
have a couple of RFPs for you guys to take a look at so that you can select who you'd like to use.
Okay.
One quick question I had as well. I know when we had our representatives here, we had talked about getting them a prioritized list of budget information at the beginning of April. So just wondering, like,
Yep, we talked about
what our
budget
goal
sub.
is.
Patrick and I talked earlier today about scheduling a budget sub, probably towards the beginning of next week if possible.
Okay.
I need you guys to pick some of your upcoming meeting dates so I can figure out what that looks like.
So we are meeting next week.
You are meeting next week, 3:25, where you'll be getting the overview from the Vocational Planning Committee, as well as the last two budget presentations are athletics and facilities. So those will both be next week. The first Tuesday in April is April 1st. You still need to have a fee discussion. You need to get an admin recommended budget. We had offered 4:15 as the joint meeting for select board and
So-
advisory. Advisory said yes, select board hasn't answered yet, but
So could we meet the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th?
yes, absolutely.
Which would allow us to do fees on the 1st.
Fees and admin recommended on
admin
the first, then
recommended.
it gives you an opportunity as a body to have a conversation about the budget on the 8th.
Right, which you really wanted to be able to do.
Before the
Yeah.
15th.
And then.
And would that be a 6:30 meeting?
Yes. And then on the 15th, we will have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Board.
Okay, can we get those dates one more time,
Yep,
please?
the
Sorry.
1st, the 8th, and the 15th.
So
to
it's
be-
just the next four
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.
Yeah, the next
So
four
just the
Tuesdays.
next month.
1,
Yeah.
8, 15.
Yep.
All the days, David, every Tuesday, just put us in your calendar.
Yeah.
And definitely not the 22nd, right?
That's school vacation
Oh,
week.
I know.
And, yeah, just so,
And maybe the 29th if needed, or are we not?
So you have to schedule a public budget hearing. You can either do that on
So
April
when-
29th or the first Tuesday in May. It's up to you. You also
when
could
is
also do
the-
school choice.
When is the budget due to the town? Like, when do we have to approve?
that,
Just before town meeting.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, quite honestly, by the time we're done with the joint budget meeting on the 15th, the number will be pretty locked. Just so you're all aware, I'm not here the week of the 28th.
Well, it looks like we can't have a meeting then.
Well, you can, you, by all means, you all can, right? You get to fly free at that point
It
because.
will be the first Tuesday in April.
So the first Tuesday in May is the 6th, which we are scheduled to meet
Yeah, so you
already.
could do your public budget hearing on May 6th and then the
And we
following
could do
meeting is
school
town meeting.
choice too. Yep, and then the following, yeah, is town meeting.
And, okay. So we'd hold the 29th if needed.
We'd hold the 29th if needed. We would likely have the public budget hearing and the school choice hearing on Tuesday the 6th.
Okay.
So that every Tuesday for the
Excuse me, I'm
foreseeable
so
future,
sorry.
except for the school vacation week and the 29th.
Right, the 29th is tentative.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
okay. So is there any other items to discuss?
School calendar.
You're getting that as a first read next week.
Awesome.
Okay, so at 8:39, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
So motion by Allison, seconded by Katrina. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? We are adjourned. Thank you.